The sun rose over the bustling neighborhood of suburban Karachi, casting warm light on the Ahmed family's modest home. To the outside world, they were the epitome of familial harmony. Samira Ahmed, a devoted mother and wife, juggled her responsibilities with grace. Her husband, Imran, was a successful businessman, and her mother, Farah, often visited to lend a helping hand with their 2 young children. Samira's mornings were a whirlwind of activity. She prepared breakfast for the family, ensured the children were ready for school, and managed the household's daily routine. Imran's warm smile and playful banter with the kids painted a picture of a loving father. Meanwhile, Farah, who had recently moved closer to stay more involved in her daughter's life, became an integral part of the family dynamic. Neighbors often remarked on the Ahmed family's apparent closeness. The sound of laughter often echoed from their home, and their unity seemed unshakable. Yet, beneath this veneer of perfection lay a web of secrets waiting to unravel. Farah's presence in the household brought comfort to Samira, who admired her mother's resilience and wisdom. However, it also introduced subtle shifts in the family's dynamics, shifts that would later prove catastrophic. Unbeknownst to Samira, the seeds of betrayal were already being sown, threatening to dismantle the life she had so carefully built. Farah had always been a commanding presence, her confidence and poise radiating in any room she entered. After the death of her husband years ago, she'd cultivated a strength that Samira deeply admired. But beneath Farah's composed exterior lay an ambition and hunger for attention that few understood. Initially, her increased involvement in Samira's household seemed natural. Farah's wisdom was invaluable when it came to raising children, and she became a trusted figure for Imran to discuss family and financial matters. Her frequent presence offered Samira respite, allowing her to focus on herself occasionally. However, this newfound closeness began to blur boundaries. Imran's respect for Farah's insight gradually grew into fascination. The conversations that started as casual exchanges over tea turned into lengthy discussions late into the night. Farah's charisma and worldly knowledge enthralled him, creating a connection that neither of them initially acknowledged as inappropriate. For Farah, the attention was intoxicating. After years of loneliness and feeling invisible, Imran's admiration was a salve for her wounded pride. She dismissed the guilt that crept in, convincing herself that her bond with her son-in-law was harmless, even beneficial for the family. Samira remained blissfully unaware of the emotional undercurrents swirling around her. She trusted her mother implicitly and viewed Imran's deference to Farah as a sign of his respect for family values. But small signs began to emerge: stolen glances, lingering touches, and an unspoken tension that hinted at something more. The perfect family dynamic was beginning to crack, though its members remained oblivious to the storm brewing on the horizon. The bond between Farah and Imran deepened with every passing day. What had begun as a shared understanding of life's struggles evolved into something far more dangerous. Farah's frequent presence in the household provided countless opportunities for secretive exchanges. A brush of the hand while passing dishes, a fleeting smile when no one was looking, and late-night conversations under the guise of family matters. Imran found solace in Farah's company. She listened to his worries with an attentiveness Samira often couldn't provide amidst the chaos of raising children and managing a home. Farah, in turn, reveled in the thrill of being desired once again. Her loneliness and insecurities vanished whenever Imran's eyes lingered on her longer than they should have. Their connection was not without moments of hesitation. Both knew the consequences of their actions could be catastrophic. Farah, especially, wrestled with guilt over betraying her daughter. But each time they resolved to keep their distance, the magnetic pull between them proved too strong to resist. The secrecy only heightened the allure. Small acts of deception became second nature. avoiding each other's gaze in front of Samira, fabricating reasons to be alone together, and erasing traces of their growing intimacy. Yet, with each lie they told, the walls of their carefully constructed facade began to close in. Samira, though still unaware of the full extent of their betrayal, began to notice subtle changes. Imran's absences grew more frequent, and Farah's overly attentive behavior raised questions she couldn't quite articulate. Doubts began to gnaw at her mind, but she dismissed them, unwilling to believe that those closest to her could betray her trust. As the bond between Farah and Imran intensified, so too did the risks. They were playing a dangerous game, one that would soon spiral out of their control and leave devastation in its wake. Suspicion started to seep into Samira's once unshakable trust. While she had initially dismissed her instincts, small inconsistencies in Imran's behavior and Farah's overbearing presence became harder to ignore. Imran, who had always been punctual and dependable, began coming home later than usual, offering vague excuses about work obligations. Farah, on the other hand, seemed unusually protective of him, often deflecting Samira's casual inquiries about his whereabouts. One evening, as Samira sat alone after dinner, she decided to confront Imran about his growing absences. "Is everything okay at work?" she asked, her tone light but her eyes searching. Imran hesitated for a fraction of a second before responding, "Yes, just a lot on my plate these days," but his forced smile and diverted gaze planted a seed of doubt in Samira's mind. Farah, sensing the tension, immediately intervened. "You know how demanding his job is," she said, her voice soothing. "Give him some space to handle his responsibilities." The reassurance should have comforted Samira, but instead, it felt like a calculated deflection. The once harmonious atmosphere in the Ahmed household grew strained. Samira began noticing moments of awkwardness between Farah and Imran, an unspoken tension that seemed out of place. Their conversations, once open and animated, now contained guarded pauses and subtle evasions. Samira's suspicions deepened when she stumbled upon a peculiar scene one afternoon. She had returned home earlier than expected and overheard hushed voices in the living room. Peeking through the slightly ajar door, she saw Imran and Farah sitting unusually close, their expressions serious. The moment she entered, they abruptly moved apart, their demeanor shifting to forced casualness. "What's going on?" Samira asked, trying to keep her tone neutral. Farah quickly replied, "We were just discussing some family matters. Nothing important." Imran nodded, avoiding her gaze, but the unease in the room was palpable. Samira confided in her close friend Aisha about her growing concerns. Aisha, known for her blunt honesty, didn't mince words. "Samira, you need to trust your instincts. If something feels off, there's probably a reason for it." Encouraged by Aisha's advice, Samira decided to be more vigilant. The cracks in the family's facade were widening. What had once been a sanctuary of love and trust now felt like a house of cards, teetering on the edge of collapse. Samira couldn't shake the feeling that the life she had built was unraveling, thread by thread. Samira's quiet vigilance soon gave way to a more deliberate search for answers. She began paying closer attention to Imran's and Farah's actions, piecing together the fragments of unease that had accumulated over weeks. Late at night, she combed through Imran's belongings, looking for anything that might confirm her worst fears. The absence of definitive proof left her frustrated, but the growing doubt in her heart refused to subside. One evening, as the family gathered for dinner, Samira noticed Imran's phone vibrating incessantly on the table. The name Farah flashed on the screen. An excuse slipped out of her husband's mouth about a minor family matter, but Samira's instincts screamed otherwise. She resolved to confront him when they were alone. Later that night, Samira mustered her courage. "Imran, she began, her voice trembling. Why does my mother call you so often? What is going on between the two of you? Imran's face paled, and his denial came swiftly. It's nothing, Samira. She's been worried about you, about us. That's all. Farah, overhearing the conversation from the hallway, stepped in with a rehearsed calmness. Samira, you're overthinking this. I've only been trying to support your marriage. You know how much I care about you both. But the confrontation planted seeds of doubt in both Imran and Farah. Their covert relationship now carried the added weight of suspicion, making their stolen moments riskier and more charged with tension. Samira's determination grew stronger. She began consulting Aisha more frequently, who urged her to keep digging for the truth. If they're lying, you'll catch them. Just watch for the cracks. They always show, Aisha advised. Samira Ahmed's instincts, sharpened by weeks of unease, now led her down a dark and uncertain path. Trust, once the cornerstone of her life, had eroded, leaving behind a labyrinth of unanswered questions. The subtle glances, the peculiar silences, and the overwhelming tension in her home had formed a mosaic of suspicion that she could no longer ignore. It was late on a rainy afternoon when Samira discovered the first undeniable clue. While helping her mother organize a room, she stumbled upon a scarf, a gift she had given Imran years ago, tucked away in Farah's personal drawer. The discovery rattled her, but she chose to suppress her thoughts, chalking it up to coincidence. Yet, the knot in her stomach refused to ease. Her doubts crystallized into certainty when she overheard a late-night phone conversation. Stepping quietly into the hallway, Samira heard her mother's muffled voice through the closed door of her room, laced with an intimacy that sent a chill down her spine. The words, though unclear, bore the unmistakable tone of affection. She returned to her room that night, her heart heavy with dread. The next morning, Samira resolved to find the truth. As Imran left for work, she pretended to be asleep. When the front door clicked shut, she quickly dressed and decided to tail him. She hired a rickshaw to discreetly follow his car. It was an action that both terrified and empowered her. If she found nothing, she'd apologize for doubting him. But if her suspicions proved correct, she'd be prepared to face the fallout. The rickshaw weaved through the narrow streets, trailing Imran's car as it moved through the city. Her heart sank when he parked at a familiar cafe, a place where she and Imran had spent countless weekends. Moments later, Farah arrived. Samira's breath hitched as she watched her husband pull out a chair for her mother, their interaction far too intimate for comfort. Samira stepped out of the rickshaw, ensuring she wasn't spotted. From a discreet distance, she snapped photos with her phone. Imran and Farah's smiles, their leaning toward one another as they spoke. It was all too much to bear. Tears blurred her vision as she retreated to the rickshaw, instructing the driver to take her home. She now had undeniable proof of their betrayal, but the weight of it crushed her. Samira's world had become a maze of suspicion and doubt. Every glance exchanged between Farah and Imran felt like a dagger to her heart. Unable to endure the torment any longer, she decided to confront the truth head-on. One quiet evening, as the children slept upstairs, Samira sat in the living room, a quiet rage simmering beneath her composed exterior. She called Farah and Imran into the room. The tension was palpable as they entered, their expressions wary. "Sit down," Samira said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Once they were seated, she pulled out her phone, displaying the incriminating photos she had taken of Farah and Imran at the cafe. Their faces paled. "What is this?" Samira demanded, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. "How long has this been going on?" Farah opened her mouth to speak, but Samira's glare silenced her. Imran attempted to deflect, stammering, "It's not what it looks like. Don't insult my intelligence. Samira snapped. I trusted both of you. How could you do this to me? Farah, uncharacteristically meek, whispered Samira. Please let me explain. It was a mistake. A mistake, Samira repeated, her voice rising. You betrayed your own daughter. And you, she turned to Imran, her eyes blazing with fury. You shattered the family we built together. How dare you call this a mistake? The confrontation ended with Samira demanding that Farah and Imran leave the house immediately. I don't care where you go, but you're not staying here, she said, her voice cold and final. By the next morning, both were gone, leaving Samira to pick up the shattered pieces of her life. The fallout from the confrontation was immediate and devastating. Samira's trust in those closest to her had been obliterated. Alone with her children, she struggled to create a semblance of normalcy. Her nights were sleepless, haunted by memories of the betrayal. Farah and Imran, now ostracized by their community, faced their own private hells. Farah moved into a modest apartment on the outskirts of the city, her once commanding presence diminished by guilt and shame. Imran, too, was adrift, his reputation in tatters and his business suffering due to the scandal. Samira confided in her closest friend, Aisha, who offered unwavering support. You're stronger than this, Aisha told her. Focus on yourself and your children. They need you now more than ever. Despite the support, Samira found it difficult to move forward. The betrayal had left deep scars, and the love she once had for her mother and husband had turned to bitterness. In their isolation, Farah and Imran turned to each other once more, bound by their shared disgrace. Their relationship, however, was no longer fueled by passion but by desperation. They blamed each other for their downfall, their arguments becoming increasingly volatile. One evening, during a particularly heated exchange, Farah threatened to expose everything to the authorities, including Imran's financial improprieties. Imran, in turn, warned her to keep silent, his voice cold and menacing. If you ruin me, I'll make sure you never see Samira or the children again. Their once secretive affair had devolved into a toxic partnership, each clinging to the other out of necessity rather than love. Samira had begun to find solace in her routine, focusing on her children and her part-time job. She was determined to rebuild her life, though the wounds of betrayal still throbbed beneath the surface. One evening, she returned home to find Farah waiting on her doorstep. Against her better judgment, Samira let her in. What do you want? Samira asked, her voice cold. I just want to talk, Farah pleaded. I've lost everything, Samira. Please, let me explain. The conversation quickly escalated into an argument, with Samira refusing to forgive her mother. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them, she said. Don't come here looking for absolution. Farah's desperation turned to anger. You think you're so righteous? She spat. You've never made a mistake? The argument grew louder, the tension palpable. It was then that Imran appeared, having followed Farah to the house. His arrival only added fuel to the fire. Accusations flew, voices were raised, and the chaos reached its peak when a physical altercation broke out. Neighbors later reported hearing shouting and the sound of breaking glass. By the time the police arrived, the scene was one of devastation. Samira lay lifeless on the floor, her body bearing the marks of a violent struggle. Farah and Imran were both present, their clothes stained with blood. Each blamed the other for what had happened. She attacked me, Farah cried. I was trying to stop him, Imran countered. Their conflicting accounts only deepened the mystery of that tragic night. The trial that followed was a media sensation, with every sordid detail of the affair and murder laid bare. Prosecutors painted Farah and Imran as co-conspirators who had turned on each other in the heat of the moment. Defense attorneys argued that the events were a tragic accident, fueled by heightened emotions and years of unresolved tension. In the end, both were found guilty of Samira's murder. Farah received a life sentence, while Imran was sentenced to 20 years in prison. The verdict brought some closure to Samira's family, but the scars of the tragedy remained. Samira's children, now orphaned, were taken in by Aisha, who vowed to raise them with love and stability. She became their anchor, ensuring they grew up in a nurturing environment despite the shadow of their family's past. The story of the Ahmed family became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the devastating consequences of betrayal and unchecked desires. As the years passed, the community moved on, but for those who had known Samira, her memory remained a powerful symbol of resilience and strength. Her children, though scarred by the tragedy, carried her legacy forward, determined to build lives of integrity and love, ensuring that their mother's sacrifice was never forgotten.